Hey, what's up, everybody? I found over the last several months where certain situations have demanded a very, very quick and less than ideal return to play at a fairly high level of activity. It's really forced to collect a lot of thoughts, because the reality is when somebody has a significant acute injury, regardless of how it happened, contact or non-contact, there's still things that can be done. But in most circumstances, look, we're not gonna get through this. Like this, we're not gonna get back in 5 days. There's no breathing drill that's gonna automatically make all of this go away to a point that is satisfactory for a high level of activity. So put that in, that's the dilemma, because I've probably been put in this situation 4 or 5 times that we were really looking to get to that endpoint very, very quickly. Now, I'd like to think that with the right attention, we can get to that endpoint quicker than other models that maybe are less diligent. Not bad, just less diligent at really trying to minimize gaps. So the gap that I want to think about right now is, what is it that leads to re-injury when you come back too fast? Because we're looking at a situation where ultimately this is not perfect, this is not even close to ideal, but whatever the way the wind is blowing, this individual is looking to return to a high level of activity under whatever level of compensation is possible. And what we see is significant re-injury. And I think that's part of this return to play concept that I think is very, very flawed. I've talked about it in the past, particularly on ACL in action. There's this entire piece where when we look at literature that talks about return to play, by and large, not all, not 100%, but a lot of that literature is really being written and tested by people with a medical background. Very, very little influence in the return to play literature from ardent strength and conditioning, fitness, work capacity perspectives. Okay, so I'm going to take that perspective, because I'm going to say we're already doing as well as we can in managing the acute symptoms. Now, the thought process is really not one that fits in cleanly to lateralizations and regressions. This isn't necessarily a lateralization, because we're not really basing this generation of exercises off of something that would typically be in the program. A lateralization is basically something that you'll do instead to improve the fitness or physiological components. If you believe in doing split squats with an angled tibia and your knee hurts, the lateralization might simply be do a split squat with a vertical tibia in the front leg where your knee doesn't hurt. Lateralization is what you do instead. A regression would be, what are we going to do in terms of manual therapy and or special exercises to remediate the knee pain in the first place? Sometimes the regression could even be things more aggressive, like injections or even surgeries. This is neither. So it's a new thought process that I'm thinking through, because I've been given a problem. I think when you start to come up with new solutions, you got to be given a question. And the question is, how can we maximize whatever the landscape is to return from these injuries basically too fast? Well, here's what we're going to think of. Number one, what movement or movements create the provocation of pain? So we're going to use a very, very simple example of a lateral ankle sprain. So traditional special test, eversion test, drawer, blah, blah, blah. Most of the time we're going to find that passive inversion is going to be a provocateur of pain. So we have to do something to stay away and hide from that, from this secondary view. We certainly need to get into it. I don't think dealing with acute pain is of any type of value. You certainly need to be mobilized. You certainly need to be self-mobilizing. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about hiding from pain, because if you constantly pull on tissues that are torn, you're probably going to continue to tear them. We do need to intervene, but it's not at this cranking level. And what I think happens when you come back too quickly and you get taped up or you wear a brace or whatever you might do, you take an injection of something, the nervous system is still keenly aware of the movement that is going to elicit the pain. In this case, inversion. Now, the thought process, which can be individualized, this is just a way of thinking, and that's still my gimmick. I know it's frustrating. Just tell me what to do and I'll do it. It doesn't work like that, as much as many others would lead you to believe. What does the individual do, or what would you expect them to do in the presence of pain? Well, what are you going to do when your foot inverts into a painful ankle sprain? You'll probably attempt to evert to get out of it. And are there any other muscle chains that would be consistent with getting out of that inversion moment arm? And basically, everything all up and down the lateral chain, if that's even a thing, or the lateral line, if we're familiar with Thomas Meyer's nomenclature, anything that's up and down your side that would create a weight shift of taking an inverted ankle into a more neutral one, closer to eversion. What muscles and what actions can do that, and can we utilize those actions without demanding inversion of the ankle? Case in point, if I put you into a long-legged side plank with the injured ankle on bottom, is probably going to be very, very uncomfortable because the moment arm is to invert. You have to actively evert, and you're probably using tissues, in this case tendinous, maybe on some of the shorter perineals, they could be contractile, and they are eliciting a threat response. Training through a threat response in an acute environment doesn't make a lot of sense. If you think it does, then you can stop watching now. But what else supports that side plank? You've got all the lateral hip structures. You've got QL. You've got maybe some of the intercostals. You certainly have serratus anterior. You're going to have upper trap. All of the pieces that would get you basically back to neutral. And now, can we train the side plank by blocking the mid-lower leg up to the knee so you don't have to contract into eversion at the foot, and train the side plank that way? What are we doing? Are we really doing anything to directly improve healing? Probably not, but you could maybe create a narrative that if you did enough of anything, systemically we will improve healing. But what I'm looking for is creating mastery of the strategy that keeps you out of pain in the first place. And that's this entire musculature on the lateral chain. If it was the opposite, if you had pain into inversion, and you had a medial deltoid ankle sprain, you would look to do all the opposite. You'd look to train the groin. You'd look to train the abdominals in a pelvic tilt, etc. So there's a lot of different ways to look at things. Another example that I can think of was elbow hyperextension. And if they were cued to deliver something that would be in the centrated position of the shoulder, roughly 135 degrees, where the line of pull of the lower trap is very, very ideal. You run like a prone Y raise. Try to crank on that elbow into hyperextension, zero pain. That doesn't mean there was no inflammatory process or pathology. It just means that they were better at protecting it. So training the lower trap to create support and stabilization in the direction in which I'm showing can put you in a better compensatory environment. You're looking to thread the needle, and you're looking to create something that hopefully you can live with. It has nothing to do with healing at the local area, but can you find the pattern that they go to when they have pain? I've picked some easy ones because they're very peripheral. They're very distant from the spine. When we talk about spine, this is really not very, very different than finding a directional preference for back pain that then guides your treatment, your rehab, and potentially your training if the person's in the right stage. So we're going to take that preference of how do they get out of the pain, how do they react as a strategy, and then uptrain that so that when maybe they don't get back in 1 week, they get back in 2 weeks when the original plan was 4 to 6. They are able to demonstrate things that show they can protect themselves. How do you help them do that? You find the pattern that they would use to compensate for the pain in the first place and uptrain that. Every so often on social media, I'll see an exercise or a interesting looking series of exercises. I don't want to say progressions because they don't make sense. It's like you look at it and be like, that looks very interesting. I can see what they're trying to accomplish. I have no idea how or when I would actually use this intervention. It doesn't mean it's bad. It means it doesn't fit. It's probably not very useful other than entertainment when someone is healthy and training hard. It doesn't mean it's a bad exercise. It doesn't mean that there's this biomechanical violation or anything of this sort. It just means like it's just silly. It's just fancy. I don't know what would be the point of doing that instead of something else where you can load it up and create a much more robust physiology. What I'm talking about, again, in the presence of injury and how can we review the effectiveness of this thought process is not injury in the first place, but re-injury. So if somebody does come back and you're not quite sure if it's the right time or if it's too early or not, uptrain the motor strategies, which of course can include strength, power, and endurance, but it's in a very, very unique pattern specific to how they compensate for the injury that they're coming back from. I think that's something that we've tried a little bit. I'm not really sure if there's been objective information to show that it's successful, but it's been put across my plate multiple times in the last several months that it's become a thought process that I think we can run with. So again, painful injury, how do you come back from it? You uptrain their compensatory pattern that they use. It might not always be the same. Inversion ankle, very easy to appreciate. You're going to train everything up and down the lateral chain that would be involved in taking an inverted ankle back to neutral. Take that thought process. What gets you back to neutral or what gets you back to out of pain? Uptrain that pattern. That can be an entire extra workout. That can be the entire workout. It can be your B1 or C1 or however you try to structure things. We're just going to look at trying to find an opportunity to uptrain the compensatory patterns for someone in pain. Hopefully that makes sense. I kept a nice, keen, smooth voice because I wanted to make sure that I was getting this across because it's not something that I've talked about extensively, so I need to make sure I don't talk too fast so I make sure I get my point across. Once again, if you're looking to get somebody back and you're not quite sure if the return to play numbers are adding up, because they won't. The return to play is just this juggling act. If you're good at juggling, you'll be fine. So how do we juggle another ball? I'd like to look at how that individual compensates away from pain, and let's see what we can do. Lots of different options. This is where these functional looking exercises, you thought I was going to say something else. These functional looking exercises might have a good role. I still don't know exactly where they're going to fit in a full program. I like the idea of extra work where special exercises and accessory work are then speaking to a different master than maybe how they're often discussed in terms of bringing up weak links. The weak link here is your compensatory strategy for how you react to a painful area that's being provoked in full speed activity. How about them apples?